The galaxy held its breath as the Imperial fleet slowly repaired its wounds, its pride shattered and its power questioned. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was unsure of itself. The attack had not just been a defeat, it had been an awakening. Humanity was not the weak, broken species they had assumed. They were something new, something dangerous. In the Emperor's private chamber, the lights flickered as a hologram of the galaxy's most powerful military leaders appeared. The Imperial war machine, still bruised, was ready to strike back. The Emperor, though silent for a long time, finally spoke. "We underestimated them, but we won't make the same mistake again. We will strike with everything we have. We will destroy them." Around the room, generals and admirals nodded, their faces hard with determination. They had never imagined that a few ships, an insignificant fleet in their eyes, could pose such a threat. But now they understood. Humanity's warning had been clear. They had dared to challenge the Empire and had succeeded. "We have the resources," one of the admirals said, "but we will need more ships, more firepower." The Emperor raised his hand, silencing the room. "The humans think they are safe, but they are wrong. We will make them regret their defiance. We will make them wish they had never crossed us." The decision was made. A massive fleet was assembled, bigger, faster, and more advanced than anything the Empire had ever created. It would strike the humans' homeworld, Earth. The fleet would obliterate their defenses and crush their resolve. Ferrix, now promoted to one of the Empire's highest-ranking officers, stood at the head of the fleet. His eyes burned with anger and shame. He had failed once, but he would not fail again. This time, they would wipe out humanity in one swift, crushing blow. As the fleet prepared to leave, Ferrix couldn't shake the feeling of unease. They were heading into the unknown. The Empire had faced many threats in the past, but none like this. The humans weren't just defenders, they were fighters, survivors. The Empire had made an enemy of the wrong species. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Lyra and her crew watched as the massive Imperial fleet advanced toward their planet. The reports came in fast and furious. The Empire was coming, and they were coming, with everything they had. "We knew this was coming," Lyra said, her voice cold. "We're ready." Commander Zane stood next to her, his eyes narrowing. "They think they can crush us. They think we'll break under their firepower." Lyra looked out at the stars, her mind racing. The Empire had underestimated them before, but this time they couldn't afford to make the same mistake. The human fleet was smaller, yes, but it was more advanced, more agile, and more deadly than anything the Empire had ever faced. They had learned. They had adapted. "We won't back down," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We've sent a message, and we'll send it again. This is our galaxy too, and we'll protect it." The human fleet, a handful of ships compared to the Empire's vast armada, was ready. But Lyra knew that they had only one chance. If they failed, Earth would be lost. The stakes were higher than ever. As the Imperial fleet approached Earth's orbit, it seemed to swallow up the stars, a giant moving mass of destruction. Ferrix stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes cold as he gazed at the blue planet below. The final strike was about to begin. "Prepare for full assault," Ferrix ordered. "Target all defensive positions. Leave no survivors." But just as he gave the order, something unexpected happened. A single small human ship appeared in front of the fleet, its engines glowing bright against the dark backdrop of space. Ferrix's brow furrowed. "What is this?" The ship wasn't attacking. It was simply waiting. Ferrix couldn't understand. Was it a distraction? A trap? He had heard rumors of humanity's strange tactics, but this was beyond anything he had expected. The ship remained still, almost as if it were daring the Empire to strike. The moment stretched into eternity as the Imperial fleet hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The human ship moved slowly, almost purposefully, through the massive fleet. It didn't. Fire didn't make a move to protect itself. It was almost as if the humans were daring them to attack, and then the message came. The same voice, calm and cold, echoed across the fleet. Leave now. This is your last warning. Ferrex's eyes widened. This time, there was no threat. No weapons, just words. What are they playing at? Ferrex muttered, his grip tightening on the controls. Prepare to fire. Full assault. Now. As he issued the order, something impossible happened. The fleet of Imperial ships that had once seemed so invincible, so unstoppable, suddenly began to falter. They couldn't react fast enough. The human ship, now surrounded by a web of energy, began to move with blinding speed, zipping around. The Imperial fleet, slipping between their defenses, as if they were nothing more than floating targets. In a flash, the first ship exploded, then another, and another. The human ship moved with precision, attacking their weak points, their blind spots, striking faster than the Imperial fleet could react. Ferrex's mind raced. How was this possible? The human fleet, small but deadly, had caught them off guard once again. The final battle had arrived. The vast Imperial fleet, its pride shattered, was slowly falling apart. Ferrex, once a proud leader of the Empire's greatest warships, now stood at the helm of a dying fleet, watching in disbelief as humanity's small fleet picked them apart, one ship at a time. His mind raced, but the cold truth settled in like a weight he couldn't shake. They had lost. On the other side, Captain Lyra watched as the battle unfolded on the holographic display. Her fleet, although small, had proven more than capable. Every strike, every maneuver had been calculated to perfection. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were now the apex predators, defending their home with everything they had. Admiral Ferrex, do you still doubt the power of humanity? Lyra said quietly to herself, her voice steady but filled with a sense of grim satisfaction. The last Imperial ship was stumbling, its defenses crippled. Ferrex's flagship was the last to remain operational, and even it was struggling to hold its ground. The human fleet had avoided direct confrontation, choosing instead to strike at the Empire's weak points, exploiting their overconfidence. The Empire had never known such precision, such calculated tactics, and it was too late for them to adjust. Ferrex, standing in the control room of his flagship, clenched his fists. His entire career, his entire life had been built on the belief that the Empire was invincible. But this was something he couldn't comprehend. How had they been so wrong about humanity? "Prepare to retreat!" Ferrex shouted, his voice strained. But it was too late. As he gave the order, his ship was hit once more, the energy shield flickering before collapsing under the barrage. The ship lurched violently and alarms screamed throughout the bridge. "We can't escape," one of his officers said in a daze, staring at the controls. "There's nothing left." Ferrex's heart pounded in his chest. The battle was over, and his fleet had failed. It was a humiliation no one would soon forget. He had been wrong about humanity. They were not weak. They were not fragile. They were survivors, and now they were the galaxy's most dangerous force. Back on Earth, the last human ship, the one that had darted through the Imperial fleet with surgical precision, fired its final shots. A bright flash lit up the darkness of space, and the last Imperial ship was no more. Humanity's message had been delivered, loud and clear. "We did it," Lyra said, a quiet relief in her voice, though she knew the real battle had only just begun. The galaxy would change after today. The Empire would never forget this defeat, but neither would humanity forget the struggle they had faced. Lyra turned to her crew, a proud smile crossing her face. "We've shown them that humanity is not to be underestimated. We've shown them that Earth is not their playground." But even as she spoke, she knew the Empire wasn't truly defeated. They would regroup, rebuild, and come back stronger than before. This battle had been their victory. But the war? That was still to be determined. Humanity had won a major battle, but the galaxy was vast, and the Empire had many resources at its disposal. They would not simply give up. Lyra looked out at the stars, a determined glint in her eye. We'll be ready for whatever comes next. Meanwhile, back in the imperial capital, the Emperor watched the reports of the disaster unfolding before him. His hands trembled slightly as he read the final transmission from Ferrex's fleet. They had been destroyed, completely. The humans had proven themselves more capable than he could ever have imagined. How could this happen? The Emperor muttered, to himself, staring at the images of the human fleet's swift victory. How could we have been so foolish? He slammed his fist down onto the table, the holographic images flickering as his anger boiled over. This is not over. We will rebuild. We will make them pay for this humiliation. But in the back of his mind, a nagging thought lingered. Could they? Could they ever truly defeat humanity, now that they knew what they were capable of? The Emperor knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same. The old order was shattered, and a new one was rising, one where humanity would no longer be a victim. They would no longer be the ones to be crushed underfoot. Across the galaxy, in hidden chambers and secret places, the news spread like wildfire. The Empire's defeat at the hands of humanity was a story no one would forget. It was a story that would be told for generations, a story of defiance, of survival, The Empire was angry. After weeks of investigation, nothing seemed to explain the strange and sudden disappearances of their best ships. The footage from Commander Vex's ship had left everyone on edge, but the Council still didn't believe. They wanted proof that humans of all races were back. Back in the Empire's capital, a special meeting was called. The Imperial generals, officials, and council members gathered in a dark room filled with tense faces. The latest intelligence reports only made things worse. There were rumors, whispers from the outer colonies about a powerful human fleet, hiding just beyond the known galaxy. But there was no real evidence, only fear. Then a battered warship appeared in the capital system. Its hull was scarred, and it seemed barely able to hold together. The ship drifted into the massive Imperial spaceport, its lights blinking weakly, giving off a sickly glow. Crew members, what was left of them, stumbled out, broken and haunted. The survivors were silent, too scared to speak, too shocked by what they had witnessed. The high-ranking officers aboard the ship were not much better. They were covered in burns, their faces gaunt from exhaustion. They had nothing to say except the same words over and over. We saw them. We tried to fight. But they were too strong, too fast. We never had a chance. One officer, a young woman, spoke up. The humans, they're not what we thought. They don't fight like us. They're weapons. Their technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. No one listened at first. The stories sounded too unreal. The Empire had crushed rebellions before. This sounded like another lie, another attempt to scare them into retreat. The officers were sent to the medical bay, their stories dismissed. But General Gravis, a hard veteran of many wars, wasn't so sure. He stood quietly in the back of the room, watching the survivors. He had fought in the old wars, had heard the old stories about humanity's rise and fall, but he never believed them. He had written them off as myths. However, now something felt different. He watched the data streams. The reports about the human fleet were too consistent. They had wiped out an entire Imperial strike force in minutes. No one should have that kind of power. Gravis called for an emergency meeting with the Emperor. Emperor, Gravis began, bowing respectfully. We cannot ignore this any longer. The reports from the front lines are clear. There is something out there, something human. The Emperor turned slowly in his throne, his expression unreadable. And you believe it? "I do, Your Majesty. This is no trick. The fleet that vanished, they didn't make up those stories. The humans are back, and they are more powerful than we ever imagined." The Emperor's face remained cold, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear or curiosity, perhaps. "Then we will find them," he said. Gravis stepped forward. "And what will we do when we find them?" The Emperor's lips curled into a thin smile. "We will destroy them, of course. No one, not even the humans, can threaten the Empire." But deep down, Gravis wasn't so sure. He had seen things in his career, many things, but nothing like this. The Empire had always been strong, confident, unbeatable, but something about this felt different. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, in the shadows of space, the human fleet prepared for their next move. Captain Lyra and her crew had been waiting for the Empire's response. They knew it was coming. They knew the Empire wouldn't back down. The countdown had begun. "We can't keep waiting forever," Lyra said to her crew, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. "They will come. They will try to destroy us." Her second-in-command, Commander Zane, looked up from his terminal. "What do we do if they send a fleet?" Lyra's expression remained calm. "We do what we've always done. We defend. And we send a message." In the heart of the Empire, the message had arrived. For weeks, the Empire had prepared its greatest fleet, 100 ships, armed with the most powerful weapons the galaxy had ever seen. The Empire was confident this time. There would be no mistakes, no more losses. As the fleet neared the Forbidden Zone, all eyes were on the vast fleet's commander, Admiral Ferrix. His fleet was the pride of the Empire, built for one purpose: total destruction. They would cross the line. They would break through any resistance, and if the humans were waiting for them, they would burn them all. But as the fleet entered the zone, everything changed. The stars seemed to grow darker. No ships, no sign of life, only silence. Ferrix's eyes narrowed. He had faced countless battles, but this felt wrong. Then the first human ship appeared. It was silent, just like the others before it. No loud engines, no battle cries. Just the cold, silent approach of something that had been waiting for them. And then, the message. Again, the same calm, cold voice filled the entire fleet's communications system. "You were warned. This zone is protected. Do not return." Ferrix felt his heart skip a beat. His hand shook as he reached for the comms. "Deploy all weapons! Now!" But it was too late. The first blast hit their shields, and the Empire's best ships began to crumble. Admiral Ferrix had never experienced anything like this. The moment his fleet moved into the Forbidden Zone, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The stars themselves felt distant, as if they were watching, waiting for something terrible to happen. And then, the attack came. It wasn't a bombardment or a sudden burst of energy. It was far more terrifying. Silence. The first Imperial ship, the flagship, was struck with a strange, invisible force. The shields flickered briefly, but the damage was instantaneous. Weapon systems went offline. Communication systems scrambled. The ship shuddered as if something heavy was pressing against it. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone, vanished, like it had never existed. Ferrix's pulse raced as he watched in horror. The rest of his fleet moved in closer, trying to understand what was happening, but no one could predict what came next. Another ship was hit, and then another. Each time, it was the same. Silence, a flash of strange light, and then nothing. The Empire's finest ships were falling one by one like trees in a storm. No one had fired a shot, no warning. Just a sudden, overwhelming force that crushed them. "What is this?" shouted a commander over the comms. "How are they doing this?" But there was no answer. There was no one to give one. The human ships didn't fire a single shot. They didn't need to. Whatever technology they had, whatever power was in their hands, was far beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Ferrix stood frozen, his mind racing. He knew the Empire was the greatest force in the galaxy. It had been for centuries. But this was different. He had underestimated humanity, and now he was paying the price. "We need to retreat," shouted one of his officers. But the command to pull back came too late. The fleet was already scattered, its ships torn apart. Chaos was spreading like wildfire through their ranks. Ferrix grabbed the comms. "This is Admiral Ferrix. All ships regroup immediately. Prepare to..." Before he could finish the order, a blinding flash of light cut through the darkness of space and his voice was drowned out. The flagship's hull buckled under an unseen force. The ship was dying, and so were they. In the middle of the chaos, something strange happened. A voice filled the comms, a voice that was cold, calm, and terrifying in its clarity. "You were warned. Leave now." It was the same voice, the same message, but this time it wasn't a warning, it was a command, and it was clear. Humanity had no intention of letting the Empire continue. Ferrix tried to speak, but no words came. He watched helplessly as his fleet continued to disintegrate, as his best warriors were reduced to nothing in the blink of an eye. The Empire was crumbling before him. The might of the greatest military in the galaxy had been shattered by a force it didn't even understand. And then it stopped. The silence returned, thick and heavy. For a moment there was no sound, no destruction, no screams, just a vast, empty quiet that hung in the vacuum of space. Ferrix stood frozen, unsure if he should be thankful that it had stopped, or terrified that it had only just begun. In the aftermath, the survivors were few, their numbers thinning by the second. The remaining Imperial ships limped away, too damaged to fight, too broken to stand their ground. But Ferrix knew they weren't leaving to regroup. They were leaving because they couldn't stay. The humans had made it clear. This was their territory, and they were not welcome. On the human side, Captain Lyra watched the battle unfold on the holographic screen in front of her. Her crew remained silent, their faces grim. It had been a calculated risk, but they had known the Empire would never back down unless they were forced to. "They'll never forget this," Lyra said, her voice low. "But they'll also never be able to touch us again?" Her second-in-command, Zane, nodded. "We've sent a clear message. The Empire will think twice before crossing into our space again." But Lyra wasn't so sure. This wasn't just about the Empire. It was about the entire galaxy. She had seen the power of their fleet, the might of their weapons, but she also knew the dangers they posed. If the humans were to survive, they needed to be prepared for everything. As the fleet drifted away from the now-ruined battlefield, Lyra's mind raced. The message had been delivered. The Empire had been forced to retreat. But what would come next? Would they try again? Would they send something even more terrifying to crush humanity once and for all? She didn't know. But one thing was clear. Humanity had made its mark, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Back in the Empire, the survivors of the Eye. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the busy trade routes and shining Empire worlds, a small scout ship floated in deep space. It belonged to the Galactic Empire, the most powerful force known to the stars. The scout's mission was simple: explore unknown systems and report back. Nothing exciting ever happened on these missions, but today was different. The ship picked up a strange signal. It was weak, almost broken, like it had been floating for years. At first, the crew ignored it. Signals drift all the time in deep space. But this one was different. It had a message inside. After some work, the ship's AI decoded it. It was just one line. A voice, clear, cold, and human, said, "This zone is off limits. Do not enter." That was it. No name, no warning, no explanation, just those words. The crew laughed. Humans? They were supposed to be extinct. A race that fought too many wars and vanished hundreds of years ago. No one in the Empire had seen a living human in generations. This had to be a joke, maybe an old satellite left behind. The captain sent the message back to Central Command with a quick report. Dead signal, likely ancient, no threat. Then the ship moved deeper into the area. It never returned. The Empire sent another scout ship. Then a third. All three vanished without a trace. No signals, no wreckage, just silence. The Empire didn't like mysteries. So, they sent a small combat squadron, 6 warships, strong enough to deal with pirates or rogue machines. They entered the zone with full shields, scanning all directions. Hours passed. Nothing. Space looked empty. But then something happened. One by one, the ships went dark. Not exploded, just stopped, like someone had turned them off. The command ship sent out an emergency pulse. It was the last thing anyone ever heard from them. Now the Empire was angry. Losing a few scouts was annoying, but losing trained warriors and warships, that was a challenge. Someone, or something, was testing them. The Imperial Council met in secret. Many believed it was a hidden rebel force. Others said maybe a new alien race had risen, but a few remembered the stories, old ones, about humans. Still, the Council voted to investigate with force. A full fleet would be too risky at this stage, so they approved a strike force of 30 ships, fast, strong, deadly. The mission: enter the zone, locate the threat, and destroy it. As the ships crossed the edge of the dead space, tension ran high. Every system was ready. Drones were launched. Scanners were on full power. But nothing showed up. The space was cold and empty. The same broken signal still played in the background. This zone is off limits. Do not enter. Then, without warning, the lead ship exploded. Not from the outside, but from within. Its core overloaded in seconds. The crew never had a chance. Before the others could react, a second ship vanished from their screens. No explosion, no alarm, just gone. Panic spread. Orders were shouted, defensive shields were raised, but the attacks didn't stop. Lasers fired, but hit nothing. Missiles launched, but locked on empty space. It was like the enemy was invisible. In truth, they were. Far above and beyond the fleet, human ships watched silently. Cloaked in advanced tech, the Empire had never seen, they studied their enemy carefully. These humans were not like the ones from old stories. They were not loud, not reckless. They were quiet, patient, and deadly. Captain Lyra of the human stealth cruiser watched the Imperial fleet fall apart. They were warned, she said calmly. They crossed the line. Now they will understand. Back on the Imperial flagship, fear turned into desperation. One officer screamed, "We have to leave!" But it was too late. Space itself twisted. A human pulse weapon hit their engines with perfect precision, not to destroy, but to paralyze. Suddenly, every screen across the remaining ships turned black. Then a face appeared. Human, male, calm eyes, no anger, no emotion, just words. You were warned. This zone is protected. Do not return. Then silence. Of the 30 Imperial ships, only one escaped. Heavily damaged, barely functional, and missing. Most of its crew, it limped back to Imperial space. The footage it carried was terrifying. Ships vanishing, weapons failing, the human message playing over and over. When the footage reached the Council, many refused to believe it. They called it lies, fakes, fear tactics. But others knew the humans were not extinct. They were back, and now they were guarding something. What that something was, no one knew yet, but one thing was clear. The Empire had made a mistake, and the unexpected war had just begun. The lone Imperial ship floated through space, broken and silent. Its lights flickered, engines barely working. Most of the crew were dead. The few who survived sat in silence, afraid to speak. They had seen something impossible. Something the Empire said could not exist. Commander Vex stood at the window of the bridge. His armor was torn, blood dried on his shoulder. He had been there when the human ships appeared, like ghosts. No sound, no warning, just destruction. His fingers still trembled, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. Human eyes, cold and calm, looking straight into the screen, saying, "You were warned." The ship's journey back to Imperial space was long and painful. Engines failed every few hours. Life support systems were weak. They had to shut down weapons and lights just to keep air flowing, but they made it. Barely. When they entered the Empire's nearest military outpost, alarms went off. Fighters surrounded the ship. They thought it was a stolen or cursed vessel. No one believed humans were back. But when they scanned the ship and saw the damage and the footage, their fear became real. High Command sent the footage straight to the Imperial Council. In the dark war room deep under the royal palace, the Empire's leaders watched everything. The images showed ships vanishing in flashes of blue light, crew members screaming, weapons failing, and finally, the face, a human face, calm, clear, saying, "This zone is protected. Do not return." The room fell silent. Some generals shouted that it was a trick, a rebel illusion. Others said it was fake, planted by pirates. But Grand Strategist Corrin stood and raised one hand. The room obeyed him. He had seen war for 60 years. He knew when an enemy was real. "This," he said slowly, "is not a trick. These are humans, and they are stronger than we thought." "But they are extinct," said one of the council members. "No," Corrin answered. "They just disappeared, and now they're back." The room went quiet again. Some wanted to attack immediately. Others warned against it. The Emperor was called. He watched the footage, said nothing, then gave one simple order. "Find them, learn everything, then crush them." Back at the destroyed zone, human ships remained hidden. Captain Lyra sat in her command chair, watching silent data streams from deep space. The Empire had pulled back, but she knew they would return. "They never learn," she said. Her crew nodded quietly. Lyra had trained her whole life for this mission. She had never seen Earth. She was born in deep space, trained by old warriors who survived the collapse. Humans had gone silent for over 100 years, but not because they were weak. They had left the galaxy's center to grow in, the shadows, to become something more. Now they were back, and they were not ready to forgive, but they didn't want war. Not yet. That's why they sent the warning. A second signal was now ready, more powerful, set to echo across the stars. Not just for the Empire, for everyone. Deep. In the ship's AI core, a countdown began. A new message would be sent in 6 hours. It would reach every system, every empire, every race. Captain Lyra looked out at the stars. "They have 6 hours to choose peace," she said. "After that, no one crosses the line." Meanwhile, Commander Vex was called to speak to the Imperial Council. He stood alone in a large chamber, guards on both sides. Holograms of the leaders floated in the air around him. "Tell us again," one asked. "What did you see?" Vex looked up. "I saw them. Real humans. With weapons we don't understand. With silence that kills. They didn't attack us first. They let us choose. We chose wrong." The council was quiet. Then Grand Strategist Corrin asked, "If we send more ships, what do you think will happen?" Vex's voice shook. "They'll disappear. All of them, like mine almost did." The holograms vanished. He was escorted out, unsure if anyone had listened. But someone had. In a hidden chamber deep under the palace, the Emperor watched everything alone. His eyes were cold. His mind was already planning. "So," he whispered, "they think they can warn us? They think they can scare us?" He turned to his private AI. "Prepare the next fleet. Secretly. I want the full power of the Empire at the edge of that zone within days." "Yes, Emperor," the AI replied. In space, the countdown continued. The human message was about to begin, and far across the stars, every race in the galaxy was about to hear Earth speak.